All right, everyone, we should be live. Let's make sure that's actually the case. Of course, we have to check over on Rumble, where we just hit 116,000 subscribers as of last night. Just to be clear, let me reload this and make sure that chat's working. Chat is working. That's a good sign. Give it a couple of seconds here. We've got 9 news stories to cover today. Now, we got some big stuff, actually. It's going to be quite a fun show, I think. Oh, come on. Show the number of viewers. Yes, Kitty, you can come through. All right. Yep, we're live on Rumble. Okay, make sure the tabs are all working. Slightly important. Yes, with Mayorkas and others. Anyway, we'll start right into the news today because there's a lot to cover. By the way, I pinned a link at the top of chat. If you're watching on YouTube, some people may not be aware of this. I write and edit books, so I posted the WordPress, actually, that I put that stuff on. Different categories you can peruse to your heart's delight. Think about buying a book. It's actually the best way to support me, especially if you leave a review. That's worth like 10 sales right there, so I enjoy it when people do. Inflation surged more than expected in September as prices remain stubbornly high. And the Dow and NASDAQ, they're not really liking this news, by the way. We did have this breaking yesterday. We had it breaking, of course, during the actual live stream itself. I figured, though, that I would go back into it and explain. For anyone that didn't see, we have 8.2% inflation. This is effectively unchanged from the prior month. The problem is that inflation is calculated year over year. So that's an increase on yesteryear's already increased prices. Inflation for the prior September was already high. So it's a compounding effect. I keep seeing plenty of people making the mistake that the inflation numbers are somehow calculated month over month. So the fact that it's 8.2 now, but it was 8.3 the prior month is somehow a victory to them. But if you had an increase month over month last year in the same period, and you did a significant increase, actually inflation is technically still rising. It's not rising by as much as it was before. It is beginning to level out. But it does mean that the Fed's interest rate hikes are not enough, which ensures that they will raise them higher. This threatens employment. You're going to have stagflation, I think, at this point. I don't think that that's up in the air. And now they're casting around for people to blame for the ultimate recession and stagflation that we will be in the United States. They tried to blame the Fed itself. Well, they're hiking the interest rates a little bit too high. That didn't work. It didn't pan out so well. So we will be covering separately today as well the legacy media astroturfing the concept that OPEC will be responsible for the economic crisis that we've already been in for more than a year now. Very interesting. Baron Von Blair sent 666. Thank you very much. And of course, the baby is joining in the cacophony upstairs. Both cats are down here, so I'm just hoping that they don't attack one another. It's possible. Yeah, you can be co-host, Kitty, and don't torment one another. Next news story is actually, well, it's more meaningful. I just wanted to recap the inflation numbers because they are important. It's sort of like the OPEC scandal. People can't, don't let that fall out of the news cycle. Keep talking about it because it's impeachable in that case. Here's what Nancy Pelosi was up to on January 6th. Pelosi said to her aides on January 6th, after Trump told the rally he was going to the Capitol, that if he ended up there, I'm going to punch him out for trespassing on the Capitol grounds. I'm going to jail, and I'm going to be happy. And this is a new video clip that the J6 people have submitted. Now, firstly, I'm not going to do more than mentioning in passing the subpoena that they've issued for Trump, because their congressional subpoena is literally meaningless. Trump will ignore it, although he could just show up and grandstand if he wanted to. Midterms are less than a month away. The House is going to be overrun with Republicans. The J6 committee will die at that point. It'll be effectively have no chance to do anything further. A bunch of lame duckers like Liz Cheney there will be gone. And so it means absolutely nothing. For Nancy Pelosi to threaten to physically assault a sitting president, because, of course, on January 6th, he had not left office yet, is fairly severe. And I think that if it were a Republican politician that made similar comments, regardless of the situation, I think that they would be removed from their position. I think it would be taken as evidence that they were too volatile to stay in their position. Fellow Republicans would throw them under the bus. Instead, what I see from a bunch of liberals right now is celebrating Pelosi as fierce, as charismatic and brave. Well, she was ready to deck that evil orange man if he showed up at the Capitol that day. She was ready to fight. She got a good fighting spirit in her. Now she's in her mid-80s. The idea that it's a credible threat, of course, is bullshit. Nancy Pelosi did not physically intend to actually punch Donald Trump or go to jail, because then she would miss out on her daily ice cream treat. She's a frail old woman. It's not a credible threat. It's sort of like if Joe Biden threatens to beat some foreign leader up. Nobody takes it seriously. He'd take one swing, he'd fall over, and that would be the end of the fight. But for her to threaten that very openly, and for the J6 committee to fucking air this publicly and try to cast it off as Nancy Pelosi being brave, instead of Nancy Pelosi, the unhinged and violent individual with clear dementia who's riled up at the moment because she erroneously believes that there's a coup being staged or something, is very, very funny. They actually thought that this should be put forth as evidence of their position, as evidence of their particular platform, which is Orange Man bad. I don't see how Nancy Pelosi threatening to punch the sitting president of the United States does anything other than to make her look like a goddamn laughingstock, in more ways than one. But they're celebrating it anyway. And of course, they're not covering this in the news nearly as much as they are the subpoena. But the subpoena means absolutely nothing. Trump is just going to shrug his shoulders, go back to the Mar-a-Lago and play another couple of holes of golf because he doesn't have to comply with the subpoena. The J6 committee is illegal anyway. In its current inception at this point, has gone so far beyond the scope of the initial investigation, it's completely illegitimate. The American people right now are suffering in their wallets. They're suffering from higher crime. They're suffering from the open border crisis, looming nuclear war, and all of these other things. Do you really think that anyone who hasn't already decided they're going to vote straight Dem gives a goddamn about what the J6 committee says? The polls don't show it, and that's been repeated for some time. They're losing leverage every single time they say something hyperbolic. For them to try to subpoena Trump is bullshit. They know it. They know he's not likely to show up. And Nancy Pelosi apparently is completely unhinged. And that's the long and short of it. Paracelsus Underrock, Shadow Stats still holding steady at 18% annual inflation. Yeah, so you got to realize that you do use a different inflation indicator these days. It makes it look less bad than it is. If you were to use the metric that was used during the oil shock recession of Jimmy Carter, we're already way far beyond that. Things are far worse by a considerable margin. Other than unemployment, you don't officially have stagflation yet. Some of it's hidden in the sense of people that are working part-time as opposed to full-time. Again, that's a new system that we use to calculate things. And part of it, of course, labor force participation. The Southern V, hey Sticks, watch the new tech. Could I get better at reading and writing? I'm 26 and black and always said as a kid that I should have been left behind. How could you get better at reading and writing? Read a lot of books. Just find what you're interested in genre-wise. It could be sword and sorcery. Maybe you like reading encyclopedias. Who knows? Just get a bunch of that shit and read it all. And then you'll get ideas in your head, potentially, for things that you can write about. And just try scribbling them down. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be a full-length story. You're not going to write a novel on your first try. And then just do it. Just practice. Makes perfect. Mr. Wonderful, did the Sham 6 committee just step in Trump's trap? He can call out the refusal of his offer of 10K National Guard, or would he have his hands tied? Yeah, they did decline his offer to send the Guard in to make sure that everything was peaceful. That should probably be spoken about more often if he takes the stand, if he does comply with the subpoena, and I hazard a guess he won't. I have a feeling he would bring that up. Well, I tried to solve this problem before the problem existed. Nobody wanted me to do that because they wanted rioting that day, because the Orange Man bad. And Pelosi would have a few problems. Dan Malone, 53. Happy Halloween. Not quite yet, although I am making roasted squash soup tonight. So it's going to be a Halloween meal. Spooky food. Darun Albane. The Antifa 529 insurrection. White House fire damage has not been repaired. Has been enshrined. Yeah, you'll remember that leftoids rioted that May. That was never spoken of in the same sense as the evil insurrection of Donald Trump on J6. There was no congressional committee looking into that one. Cindy Drellick, Pelosi, rules for thee, but not for me. Loved your idea for the death penalty on Twitter this morning. Actually, a great idea we could get creative with. I think gladiator style might prevent violence. What happens to the winner? Well, you let the winner free. You've just executed 7 criminals and you don't have to go through a lengthy appeals process. You made a shit ton of money. And the hope is that, they don't want to go back through the Coliseum again. And for lesser offenders, people, they're in there for an intermediate spell. You have a UFC style fighting system. You don't fight them to the death for that. You'd make money, and it would be interesting. It's the only way in which the death penalty can actually be used in which it's proper, because it becomes voluntary. Friendly Neighborhood Sawyer, Tim Cast is 30 shy of episode 666. It's rightfully yours. Yeah, apparently I have an invitation to be on that particular episode, but I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get back to the United States fast enough to be there. Of course, I have a child now. I'm currently in the Netherlands. We'll see what happens, but I would be interested. It doesn't have to be that particular episode, though. It'd be almost funnier to have like a Fire and Brimstone Christian on for 666. I think that would be even funnier. Mind of a Madman 69. Have you seen the roast of Dankula and the newest Brandon Herrera gun meme review? Both good laughs. No, I haven't. Symbolic Belief. Do you know any magic tricks? Do you like magicians? Illusionism is fun. I don't really do magic tricks, though. One time I did make a coin disappear, behind my back, of course, and it flummoxed my niece, and she thought that was interesting. I got lucky, though. I happened to toss it at exactly the right angle so that it ended up under the blanket at the time. And so actually for a while, I didn't know where the coin had gone either. Yes, I made the silver dollar disappear. I wasn't even trying. And yes, there's a lot of interference upstairs, but the door is closed today, so I'll try to bear with it and go through it. Next news story. This is a big one, actually. Ukraine journalist rips Macron's nuclear response. Don't be like France. Ukrainian journalist Kate Levchuk on Thursday slammed French President Emmanuel Macron for his tweet after saying in a Wednesday interview that France would evidently avoid using nuclear weapons in case of a nuclear attack in Ukraine. We do not want a world war, Macron tweeted, adding in the same thread, we are helping Ukraine to resist on its own soil, never to attack Russia. Vladimir Putin must stop this war and respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. And so I guess people are pissed off at him for not wanting to start a nuclear conflict. Very, very interesting. Yeah, Macron is pro-Russia now. I actually responded to the tweet and was joking about that, saying, well, yeah, that means you're pro-Russia, of course. A few people didn't get the sarcasm. We've gotten to the point where if you do not wish to deploy nuclear weapons against Moscow, thus ending the world as we know it, you're pro-Russia. You're weak. And so the insinuation here is, well, the surrender monkeys over in France, they're weak. I would point out that historically speaking, correcting this Ukrainian journalist, France actually has done pretty goddamn good in war. You're talking about World War II when they sort of rolled over because they weren't war ready at the time that the Nazis decided, hey, Paris sounds nice this time of year. You're not talking about most prior wars. They kicked ass in the 1800s. If anything, the Germans got their shit shoved in, along with the Russians, by the way, so you should be fine. David Hunter, hope you all stay warm there this winter. Of course. Yeah, we should, Alphabet is pointing out, Senator Patrick Leahy hospitalized after feeling unwell. No, I don't give a shit about Pat Leahy. He's retiring anyway. He's ancient as the sands of time, and I've never liked the bastard, so, to hell with him. But, yeah, with regards to Macron, I find it interesting, and this is not the only isolated incidence of this. Any criticism of Zelensky, any criticism of Ukrainian policy, including criticism that's in line with the legacy media's criticism up to a couple of years ago, any criticism of sending free weapons to Ukraine while Americans are suffering or Europeans, any insinuation that you're uncomfortable with the current energy war going on is taken as evidence that you love the Russians, you suck Putin's cock, you want the Ukrainians to be destroyed. You want them to be annexed. Are these people goddamn out of their minds? You sound like Bush fans, a la like 2002 or something. You sound like the people that were chomping at the bit to invade Iraq or Afghanistan, thinking that there's no possibility of any solution in a crisis other than to bomb things. You sound like Vladimir Putin, oddly enough. You're the same exact. How is it any fucking different? You can understand that the Ukrainians were invaded and are suffering and support them in their sovereignty without wanting to launch nuclear weapons at Russia. Macron was simply saying that if Ukraine suffered tactical nukes, and there's a remote chance that that'll happen, it's less than 1% easily, that they would not nuke Russia. If you nuke Russia in retaliation, France would be completely destroyed. I'd probably be able to see the mushroom clouds over Paris from here because of how fucking flat the land is. It would irradiate half of Europe. France would lose everyone. Everybody would die. When considering the kind of weapons that Russia has, it would take a few dozen of them to kill every living thing in France. So Macron should just come out and warn Vladimir Putin, hey, if you attack the neighbor that we're not actually an ally of at all, with anything that smells nuclear at all, maybe it's a bunker buster, maybe it's a radiological weapon, we're going to nuke you. Yeah, that will do really, really well. This is great foreign policy advice from the Ukrainian journalist here. What a great idea. What a wonderful time. They almost want nuclear war. If you're so goddamn depressed, then why don't you just go jump off a bridge or something? If you're really that keen to die, there are a lot less painful ways than being irradiated and dying of radiation poisoning or cancer, aren't there? Why don't you leave everyone else out of it? Jesus. Gerald Armstrong, French got wrecked in the 1870 Franco-Prussian War. Yeah. Scarfy the Strange, I think listening to podcasts while high gives deja vu. Being high in general gives that. Scott Steiner, the world's greatest ring announcer. If crack becomes legal, would you and Sleazy form a benefits company? Its mission, sell high-quality American-made crack to counter Chinese fentanyl. Yeah, it probably is better for you than fentanyl. Now, I wouldn't sell crack, although I don't believe it should be illegal strictly unless you're selling it to kids or something like that. Drug pushing or something. People should be able to do what they want. We're the land of the free, but, it's certainly not the home of the brave at this point. Rusty Shackelford, former teacher who's known for inappropriate behavior, is running for Iowa House as a Dem. We have a little trolling campaign going on if anyone would like to help. We'll post link. Excellent. Sounds like fun. Mark Shackelford. If the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam's still an event worth attending. Used to be awesome before weed became largely legal in the USA. I wouldn't know anything about it because I don't smoke weed. I'm sitting here. I go from Vermont, which is the weed state, to the Netherlands, which is the weed country. And, I'm not straight edge necessarily, but I don't do marijuana. Kyle Karpinski sending $10. No comment. Thank you very much. Next news story. This is actually, I'm not going to refer directly to the article. The idea is that crime is a big disadvantage for the Democrats in the midterm elections. I would like to point out that I do not believe that high crime rates, which are soaring under Biden's administration, actually have that big an impact. I think it'll be all about the economy and the border. Now, the border overlaps with crime. Technically, so does people's income. Here's why it's not going to have an outsized impact. If anything, it's a counterbalance to the abortion debate or maybe education, and it evens the odds a little bit in the Republicans' favor, but it's not really it's going to swing maybe a point of the voters. And here's why. Crime rising in the United States is not equally applicable to all areas of the United States. In areas where crime was already more prevalent, you see a greater uptick. It seeped out towards the edge of the suburbs, which is the biggest impact, but it still tends to be in larger metro areas. So cities with 250,000 population or more. And then you have the drug problem. On that, the Republicans kick ass as an issue too. And the border crisis and attendant crime down on the southern border. Outside of those zones, sort of the blighted small town America of the Appalachian areas or the Rust Belt and close to the southern border, I don't think this makes a major difference with regards to voting, because the areas in which crime is rising the fastest, number one, they tend to be overwhelmingly Democrat. So you need a huge swing in order for it to make really a functional difference, and then not necessarily at the state level, like for a Senate seat or something like that. And number two, those areas have already had high crime. So people say, well, the ghetto got a little bit more ghettoized. Well, that's not going to change. They're already voting Democrat. That's why they're living in a ghetto, by the way. Cause and effect are often skewed with regards to this. It's not going to have any impact on a town that doesn't have any increase in crime, some homogenous farming community, some outer suburban area, small town America. For the most part, drugs would be a bigger thing than violent crime, certainly. Property crime may apply, but again, that's not equally applicable. There's a difference between the outer suburbs with the upper middle classers and the marginal suburbs that are really, really close to the inner city that may be having that impact. Most people don't live in the latter. It's a relatively small proportion of one relatively small voting base, only in certain urban areas. I'd be surprised if it changed the minds of 1 million voters in a midterm election where turnout, as far as I can see, is likely to be relatively high, both by Democrats and Republicans. Then you also have the fact that rising crime is not going to dissuade anyone who believes in the defund the police canard. If anything, they're like, hey, yay, more crime. Well, that's basically what anarchism is, right? Yeah, I'm going to vote straight Democrat. So I don't think it'll have a big impact. If I had to rank the 5 issues, crime would be number 5. Abortion would be number 4. But the top 3 are inflation and gas prices, and those are kind of sort of hand in hand. And foreign policy at this point. I realize that the looming nuclear war still hasn't technically cracked into that realm, but it's getting worse, and it can be relied upon to get worse. And I think by midterms will be in the top 5 for issues. So I think that the higher crime rate, because of Biden's soft on crime policies and because of blue state mismanagement, really just counterbalances in the Republicans' favor the favor that's granted to the Democrats from having an edge on the abortion issue. And they're overstretching, so that advantage may go away as well. Ultimately, the Republicans lead on the top 3 issues, and they're all economical. The border would be the third one. And really, I mean, you can see the writing on the wall as far as the midterms. I would expect at this moment the Republicans pick up 2 Senate seats, 2 gubernatorial slots, and 35 plus House seats. That is a red wave election, and it could go higher. If there is any polling skew at all right now with the GOP narrowly ahead in the generic, if they've actually got a 1-point advantage beyond that, it throws them the Pennsylvania Senate seat. Herschel Walker probably manages to edge out Warnock, although it'll be very close. It gives them both of the positions in Nevada that they want. It gives them the Oregon gubernatorial race. It gives them everything. They might walk away with 4 gubernatorial slot pickups. It could be legendary. Don't even get me started on the House. The Republicans literally need none of the toss-up seats in order to change to have a 20-seat majority. So the writing's on the wall with regards to that. Hismanai says, happy clank. Chatter Factory claims that I do not know how to drive a car. That is false. I actually own a vehicle in the United States. Currently rusting into its footprint. It's going to need some work, unfortunately, and it's a sweet ride, too, let me tell you. Next news story. 7 times disinformation turned out to be just the opposite. I'm not going to go through all of these because some of them I'm probably not allowed to mention, but we can mention Hunter Biden's laptop, that story, and the lab leak theory. We can mention that. We're not allowed to mention number 3 on YouTube. Number 4 is up in the air at this time. Number 5, the mistreatment of January 6th defendants. Yeah, you remember when they said that they weren't being mistreated, but then the U.S. Marshals showed up, did an investigation, and said, yeah, they were. That was a little bit odd. We can't mention number 6. We can mention critical race theory in schools, though. Yeah, CRT is taught in a number of U.S. schools. They claim this wasn't the case, although they said, what if it was the case? It would be a virtue because it sounds pretty good. Wokeness, uber alles. What I wanted to point out is that more often than not, when you get a concerted effort involving the legacy media and big tech and potentially a political connection, saying that something is disinfo, saying that a foreign state is trying to inject it as an issue for one reason or the other, there is at least even odds, and usually better than that, that the real disinfo is the claim that the story is disinfo. Hunter Biden's laptop is the ultimate example of this. So over all of the other trash that we've seen over the last decade, Hunter Biden's laptop being labeled disinformation and the FBI openly lying about its intention definitely takes the cake. The fact is that it labeled it misinformation, knowing that it wasn't, and did so for political reasons. It then lied to Facebook and numerous other sites. They were the only ones that didn't fully take the bait. leading that excellent exchange last month between Zuckerberg and Joe Rogan. It might explain why there's constantly gunning for Joe Rogan, trying to get him kicked off of Spotify. Aliza, right now, taking out a strong leader can cause chaos. Chaos would help the WEF and Russia. I think the war is Klaus versus Putin. No, the WEF doesn't mind Russia. They like that people are dying right now. Helps with the depopulation agenda. Wally World, Fetterman is holding a rally near me. Should I attend? Make sure to get footage of him saying weird shit if you do. Maybe hold up a sign saying Fetterman is crazy or something like that. People will probably attack you physically if you do so. Dan Malone, 53. Underwater global communication cables at risk. They always are. Texas P12. Have you finally checked out Oregon? Yes, although I would point out that it appears that a runoff is likely there because there's an independent candidate in the race. It's not entirely certain that the Republicans will actually grab it up because that candidate's votes could go to the Democratic contender. Symbolic belief. How would a red wave actually change our country? Well, you certainly would see them, the Republicans, which are overwhelmingly the new ones are all MAGA. So these are not neocons. These aren't John McCain or Mitt Romney. They're MAGA candidates. I think that they will at least attempt to do something. I think they will stand in the way of Biden's budgeteering. That's the most important immediate effect. He'd have to parlay with them, and it'd be a lot harder than dealing with a Romney or something like that. They would actually want to trim the budget. And I don't mean trimming a little bit of fat off the edge. I mean slimming it down considerably. You would see the legislature not going after guns, certainly, which is meaningful in the wake of Bruin. So you wouldn't have the legislature standing in the way of the states restoring the Second Amendment. That's a good thing. You probably would see an attempt at tax reform, although Biden will veto it. Then you need the votes potentially in the Senate. So then you have to parlay with the Democrats. You would probably also see the stymieing of huge handouts to Ukraine. At some point, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Lauren Boeberts of the party would probably put the kibosh to that, which means as far as the U.S. is concerned, we'd be de-escalating the potential for nuclear war. I think that's fairly meaningful. Memento Mori. If Russia gets away with using nukes, do you expect to see more countries using small nukes in war against non-nuclear enemies in the future? Yes, which is why I hope that they don't use them. Because if you let that cat out of the bag, big problems are ahead, and it is inevitable. It doesn't matter what the response is. If you respond, you have a world nuclear war. 90% of the world's population dies. Mostly not from the nukes, though. Mostly from cholera and starvation in the subsequent years. So mankind is crippled and all of our dreams are dashed on the rocks and everyone suffers for 100 years. If you don't respond, you make it clear that if a nuclear state decides to nuke one of its neighbors in order to annex its land, it's all hunky-dory. Oh boy, wouldn't China love that? Oh yeah, we only dropped a couple of tactical nukes on Taiwan. Yeah, Taipei's gone. We'll just rebuild it. I mean, it'll be shittier than it was before because it'll be made in China, but Aussie's robots, Russia and the BRICS countries seem non-woke, or do you think that's propaganda? If not, that gives them an advantage to some. Oh, they're woke. There's a lot of wokeness in China. They're fucking communists. Where do you think all the pro-woke communistic bullshit came from in the first place? They've been actively promoting it. They run TikTok, for Christ's sake. They promote wokeness. They're going to get infected. They're going to get high on their own supply at some point. It'll be fucking funny, by the way. The Grizzly, why is it that the Dems never seem to learn from their failures and keep pushing for agendas that seem unpopular with the majority of the voting public, i.e. stuff like anti-gun bills, Green New Deal stuff, and open borders? Ideologues. Not all Dems push these things. The problem is that they let the far left into the party to build a broad tent sort of thing, which is why the Republicans right now are absorbing even left-leaning independents and certainly certain union Dems. They made a mistake. They need to collapse as a party, get rid of the left, tell them go vote green or something, fuck off, and then they can get the independent voters back aboard. It's a strategic blunder on their part. Scott Steiner, the world's greatest ring announcer. If the Second and Ninth Appeals courts continue to stall for months to even years on hearing Second Amendment cases, will Thomas force SCOTUS to hear some of them? Possibly. It's possible that can happen. But the Fifth Circuit keeps taking up cases, inevitably siding with Bruin, so it doesn't really matter. The Landlord Harassment Channel. What would you say if you met Jesus face-to-face? I'd say, well, hi. I don't know. What would I say to him? Desert Fox, could you speak to the non-aggression principle in regards to the provocation of Russia? How far can you be pushed before you handicap your ability to defend? I would say that Russia obviously lied about its original intent. Now, they're claiming a violation of the Minsk agreement, which is technically true, but now they're trying to annex a chunk of Ukraine. So when they talked about denazification or defending themselves against NATO aggression, these things don't apply in the annexation sense now, do they? I mean, I really feel sorry for the anti-war Russians right now. They've got it harder. In the West, if you're anti-war, you get called a Putin shill. In Russia, if you're anti-war, you get gulagged. So feel sorry for them. Next news story, and this is predicted. Tulsi Gabbard says Democratic leaders foment a culture of fear to keep people in line, which is true. Gabbard also called leaders of both parties warmongers and warned of nuclear Armageddon stemming from the Russia-Ukraine war. Again, I'll make it clear in brief here, I do not believe that there's actually going to be a nuclear exchange over Ukraine. It's possible at any given point a button can be pressed, but at any given point, it's not very likely. We've been in situations like the Cuban Missile Crisis before that technically did bring us closer to the brink of a nuclear war. And that was directly Soviet and US. It didn't involve a third party other than Cuba being a hosting platform for Soviet weapons. We've been closer before. So that part, I don't give a shit about. But what I predicted is that Tulsi Gabbard was not joining the Republican Party. And now they'll be up in arms over this. She's really pointing out the neocons and their problems. She seems a little bit more amenable to a MAGA populism. But she has not joined the Republican Party, and this should probably cement in people's minds that my prior prediction from the other day was correct. The fact that she's left the Democrats doesn't mean she became GOP. I had this happen. Technically speaking, in the late 2000s, I was a Democrat. I favored them because the Bush administration was such an abysmal failure and leading us down such a dark path. I never registered as a Democrat, but I was basically a Democrat. I was young and dumb and thought that they were the good guys at the time. By 2012, I had figured out that that wasn't really the case, and I voted for Ron Paul, and the rest is history. But the fact that I left the Democrats in the tacit sense didn't make me a Republican. I get cast off as one. There are still people who fucking believe that I'm a conservative of some stripe, which is fucking hilarious. And I always have to point out to them that's not the case. And look back through my videos if you want a reason why. And the fact that I left the Dems doesn't make me a Republican. I like some of the MAGA Republicans. I don't like any of the neocons. I can't name a neocon that I support. Even the missing link Republicans like Ted Cruz, who play the MAGA game without actually naming the MAGA name, I don't like them either. So I can't be a Republican. I mean, I don't align with them on a half a dozen major issues, but I also don't align with the Democrats because they've gone crazy. And ultimately, between the two parties, at least at this moment, and this won't always be the case, just to be clear, partisan hats off, right now, the Democrats are demonstrably and objectively far worse than the Republicans as a whole. There are Republicans that are exceptions. You got shitfucks like Mitt Romney. There are Democrats that are exceptions. Tulsi Gabbard, for example. She has redeeming qualities. She's not completely out to lunch. But that's the exception, not the rule. Overall, the Republicans are superior to the Democrats at this particular time. Yeah, I voted for Ron Paul. Vote for Mitt Romney. That'll make a huge difference. He would have done so much better than Barack Obama. Holy shit. Honestly, good that Obama was reelected. Just stay with the moron that's already in power. For what little advantage it's worse. Miguel Barrera, seems California passed a law that makes it illegal for doctors to disagree and contradict politicians. Gee, I wonder why. That is actually fake news, like literal fake news. That is not what it pertains to. Has to do with actually administering procedures per California law. If I were a doctor there, to be clear, I would leave the state. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be imprisoned for disagreeing with a politician. Alejandro Munaz, morning Sticks. Quick, vague question. What do you think about the king of moronic nihilistic millennials, Mr. Nietzsche? Seems an all right dude. Nihilism has its advantages too. JWT6577, I like Tulsi even more now. We should all be telling both parties to piss off. Well, keep in mind, she is still a leftoid for most intents and purposes, although she does seem to have finally tempered her gun hate, which is, admirable. Again, another redeeming quality. I still give her a C-, though. as a political figure altogether. And I have a feeling she's doing this mainly to get attention so she can go on to talk shows and stuff. To make money. Everyone's got to make a living. It's good capitalism. Mr. Wonderful, I will go out on a limb and say Trump actually appears before that farce. A golden opportunity to troll before the greatest TV audience ever. I hope that he does. I agree with you, it'd be a good idea. I'm just skeptical. Immortal Legend, do you have any additional info for Majewski in Ohio? No, no new polling as far as I know there. Spike 11117. Warnock and Walker debate tonight. Will the outcome change votes? For example, if Warnock doesn't smack Walker as the better speaker. I think that Walker will clearly be outclassed by Warnock rhetorically. Ultimately, though, there are enough voters that care about actual issues that I think Warnock will break even. I don't think that it'll really change the trajectory of the race. Any more than high crime under Bidenomics will. Next news story. Here's your AstroTurf of the day. Reuters reporting. It's Reuters, so of course, there's no astroturfing and propaganda on behalf of the Biden admin here. OPEC plus oil supply cuts could tip world into recession, IEA says. Oh my God, we're headed for a world recession because of what Biden asked OPEC not to do. What a double framing. It's not my fault the U.S. is in a recession. It's OPEC's fault. Had nothing to do with me encouraging lockdownerism for excessive periods or attacking our own energy industry, which I would think would compensate for them cutting the amount of oil that they're outputting. But don't talk about that. Biden is blameless. As long as the prices are rising, he has nothing to do with the energy prices. No, just blame OPEC. After failing to blame Russia for the world tipping into recession, and after failing to blame the Fed, the Biden administration has clearly circled the wagons with its legacy media buddies in order to blame OPEC. So it's their fault now. The problem is that much of the world is already in recession and was already declared to inevitably be in a harder recession before the decision was made. So how would this tip us into a recession? It was already inevitable. In the US, technically, you're already in a recession. You're already in one. You had 2 consecutive negative growth quarters. You have very high inflation, low labor force participation, low business and consumer confidence. The only metric that's positive and then only kinda is unemployment. And that's probably going to start moving in the other direction because the Fed is going to continue to take action because it's terrified by the high inflation rate. OPEC had nothing to do with Keystone or with U.S. oil permitting. It has nothing to do with fracking or gas extraction, nothing to do with coal. It only affects the OPEC as Saudi Arabia and the other major oil producers. But the U.S. was a net exporter for a few years under Trump. If we had just kept that going, what would the problem be? Who cares if they cut the oil supply? That would just mean that U.S. firms can charge more for the oil. It'd be good for the United States. We'd be making money hand over goddamn fist. Instead, we end up with the feckless Biden administration, the stewardship of Joey Biden attacking the U.S. energy industry. So there's your problem. Even if the OPEC cuts could be linked, absolutely. Even if you could show that it was that specific action that tipped the world into a recession, it would still in part be Biden's fault. As an exporter, we'd make more money. We'd be able to keep the lights on domestically. We could certainly afford to cut the cost of liquefied natural gas to subsidize Europe to keep them out of a recession. We'd be golden. We'd be making enormous amounts of money. We were replacing Russia in the energetic sense. We had already eclipsed the Saudis on oil. We were eclipsing Russia on gas. We've got more coal than anyone else. What disadvantage did we have? Absolutely none. We had every advantage in the world under Trump's energy policies, and Biden decided to piss it away in order to get leftoids to vote for him. Even Obama, by the way, the one bit of credit that I give to his entire presidency of any significance, Obama was confronted with the same leftoids back when he was president, towards the end of his second term. And he told them to go fuck themselves. And he said, frack, baby, frack. Yeah, it's okay with me. You can frack, you can go drill on federal lands, we'll issue more permits. He did it very quietly so as not to raise a ruckus with the leftoids, and he did wait until he had already secured re-election. But at the end of the day, he said, drill, baby, drill. It was an astonishing turnaround at the time. I remember reporting on it. I think it was 2014 or thereabouts. This was the one thing that Obama did that was really positive during his entire presidency. That and trying to normalize Cuban relations, I suppose. Biden has decided to be more opportunistic. Instead of going on the racial id Pol route, because he's white and old, he decided to gobble up id Pol leftoids economically. He wrecked our diplomatic position in the process. It's not going to be OPEC that's causing this problem. We're already in a recession. We have been since the beginning of the year. We have BW. Don't think lawyers will let him. They probably just want to raise ratings. How do you think SCOTUS cases turn out? Yeah. And we've got another one on Rumble, I think, here. Thank you, Rumble, by the way, for fixing the way your chat works some time ago. That is definitely a help for me. Zenk Ugers, Sweaty Gunt. I'm still not over the LP New Hampshire's deleted tweet of Tulsi's ass. Lol. I didn't see that one. Like your actual, like was it just a picture of her walking zoomed in on her ass or something? That sounds like the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's sense of humor at this point. I think that's a significant improvement over the neocons who ran the party only a few years ago. By the way, right now, there's almost 6,000 people watching live. Pretty great. So yeah, they're going to try to blame OPEC for the Biden recession in the U.S. And that really is from Reuters and similar sites. It's to cover Biden's ass. It has nothing to do with the larger macroeconomic situation. Next, we have video here. You can follow along, by the way, links in the description to all these things, of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez the other day. She was confronted by some anti-war protesters. It didn't go over so well. And now the big story, though, because this is a day outdated now, she's getting called a war pig and stuff for wanting to continue upping the ante in Ukraine. Think what you will about the situation. It is brinksmanship after a fashion. The real response, though, comes from today and last night, where she has been going on a goddamn tweet binge, posting constantly, getting herself into little fights and squabbles and stuff. And I've seen this tactic before. When you've really fucked up, when your front page news for doing something, and it's really, really bad. It's like Al Franken groping the sleeping reporter bad. Or you look completely shell-shocked. You've got your constituents calling you a nuclear warmonger or something. And you're a leftoid, so you really don't want that moniker because it doesn't necessarily wash off. You're getting called establishment, and you're from the Justice Dems angle, so it's not good for you, politically speaking. What do? You make a host of little distractions. So you say things, you ramble about other politicians, you start controversy, you get into Twitter fights and stuff. Since you're already trending, people get distracted by that, and then they think that's the main story. She's in damage control mode. Many such cases. Ozzy's robots. GOP does a poor job at messaging. They should be screaming specifics about how much oil, say, Keystone would be producing along with fracking, the jobs created, and where or the media buries this info. Yeah, but they would bury that anyway, even if they were screaming about it, and they know it. By the way, the damage has already been done to the Biden admin. That's energy policy is twain with the economy as the #1 issue. Biden has already taken heavy attrition from this. Desert Fox, you misunderstood my question. Do you believe Russia was provoked? In the provocation, would they be transgressing the NAP in their initial response? While they were provoked, no. Ukraine deciding to join a neighboring alliance is not a provocation for annexation. To be clear, no. The Grizzly, I have never seen such a wagon circling for any other president. Obama, the Dems' golden child, wasn't this coddled, and he had his messes swept up for. It's insane at this point, the way the media cleans Biden's poopy diaper. Yeah, it is legendary. That's the opposite of the Trump admin, by the way. Yeah, they would call out Obama occasionally. They would pull punches. They would still bounce news stories, but you haven't seen anything on the same order of magnitude as Biden. And really, part of that is because Orange Man bad. What they've done is they've painted themselves into a corner. I'm sure that legacy media outlets would like to write an expose on how Biden's clearly demented, because it's clickbait. It makes a lot of money when they do this, but they don't dare to because they helped whip up a crowd into a frenzy thinking Trump evil. So those people, by and large, still think of Biden as the savior-style replacement. Well, if you criticize Biden, you must love Trump, especially when he's the presumptive 24 candidate for the Republican Party. So they can't criticize him the same way they do a normal president, an actual president, unlike a steward. Immortal legend, it baffles me how many people will buy into the lie it's not Biden's fault we're in a recession. My in-laws and mom believe it. Just try to explain the sort of things that I've talked about on my live streams here. Biden was directly to blame for encouraging lockdownerism. Not imposing lockdowns, but encouraging lockdownerism. He is directly responsible for helping piss away the U.S. energy industry's dominance, therefore leading to a situation where Russia was capable of putting the screws to us, as well as to our European allies. It would have been impossible if the U.S. had remained a major net exporter. We would have been self-sufficient on one end, and we could have subsidized exports to Europe on the other end to help alleviate their pain, which means that they would buy more U.S. products. It would keep us out of recession. That's all you got to tell them. Steve Vaughn. I would watch on Rumble if their app wasn't so horribly broken. Yeah, I guess their app is still in development at the moment. Kyle Karpinski, thinking about putting my balls in a vice rather than voting for Oz. Any thoughts on Gregory Mannarino? No thoughts. And yeah, I mean, if I was in Pennsylvania, I would definitely have to hold my nose. But in the end, I would vote for Mehmet Oz because Fetterman's out to lunch. He's so much clearly worse. I can't wait to recap their debate. I was going to maybe do it live, but I'm not going to have the stamina later. Baby's been chuffy, all sorts of shit. Draven Oklaw, Sweden blocks joint investigation with Germany and Denmark into Nord Stream explosions due to high classification. Yes, that is also a major news story. The Swedes don't want a data share. I wonder why that could possibly be. Sweden is basically an export colony of the United States, to be clear. The Swedish government is literally the little bitch of DC. I wonder why they wouldn't want to tell the Germans that got screwed over by Nord Stream being blown up about their intel that they were gathering. Or the Danes for being next door and feeling threatened. Why would they not want to tell them that? Is it because they have evidence that, actually it wasn't Russia? Whoops. Biden really did do an oopsie doopsie. He really did fuck over the gas line that's supplying you, thus causing your incoming hard winter. Sorry about that. Sweden is covering for the United States, in my opinion. They'd have no reason to cover for the Russians. They're trying to join NATO right now. BW, SCOTUS thing was a question. They are deciding 230 and more Harper by ratings. I meant the J6 committee wanted ratings by getting Trump to show. Oh, yeah, they definitely would like him to show up because it'll be kangaroo court style. Stephen 13, a large proportion of our population is brainwashed beyond repair. Our country will have a very hard time with a low-quality population. Agreed. JW's Garage, good morning, Sticks. Continuing our non-contractual business exchange, we're back clanking for subs. Several years listener, love the live feed. So we've got JW's Garage there, doing a little bit of self-promotion. Thought about doing that on other people's channels myself, like, hey, it's Sticks X and Hammer. I'm paying you to notice me here on the live chat. The problem is I can't figure out how to actually send super chats. Oh, well. Tomes 2789, New York unconstitutional gun laws allowed to stand for now based upon the intervening of an activist. Biden diversity hire judge, despite the fact that they will ultimately just be shut down again. Yes, they will. Bruin will overrule the New York law. So don't worry too much about it. It's a temporary impediment. It's a temporary setback on the road to freedom. And now we have the final news story, also a big one. There's too much major news today to even focus on anything funny for the most part, other than Pelosi threatening to punch the sitting president and getting called fierce as the result of this. Some people have some goddamn screws loose. Most of them happen to be liberals. Alejandro Mayorkas has no shame. The DHS secretary is clearly the winner of this week's Best Lying Despot contest. I would say more than this week. Mayorkas, who is the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, knowingly lied to the U.S. people with regards to the migrants being whipped situation from many moons ago. You all remember a group of Haitian migrants, mainly Haitians, were trying to clamber up one of the entry zones across the Rio Grande to get into the United States illegally. I would point out, and I have several times before, that this was literally one of the areas that Donald Trump had slated for fortification to fix this particular border crossing where there's really nothing guarding the southern border at all, but was not capable of doing so. Biden put the kibosh to that. It would have been a different story had Trump actually gotten the money allocated for that from the Pentagon funding, but of course the House spent too long, dragged its heels, and delayed the process. Mayorkas claimed at a presser just after that happened that it was horrific and that migrants were being beaten. They were being treated. Basically, it looked like, the Klan treating former slaves or something. they're being whipped, they're trying to ride them down, et cetera, et cetera. But there were no whips. They didn't exist. Those were bridles and reins that were being talked about. And I had to have this explained to me because I don't know anything about the equestrian world. Swinging it around in circles, apparently that was an effort to keep people from grabbing the actual rein and then like veering the horse off to the side or something like that. The agents were exonerated. They were found not to have done anything wrong under DHS or any similar policies. They face no violations whatsoever. They've been repeatedly attacked by Biden, and he continues to do it even to this day. And Mayorkas claimed that they were whipping migrants, but he was told hours beforehand, and this is the revelation of this story, he was already told that that wasn't what was happening. But he went into the presser for political reasons and claimed that it was anyway. He lied to the American people, and he knew that he was lying. Normally, we can people when they do this sort of thing. Biden administration's too weak and feckless to do so. Yogi Fish, what are your thoughts on Edward Snowden becoming a Russian citizen in the midst of the current conflict? I think he was always a spy. Great shows you're doing. Thanks. I have no problem with Snowden. He revealed that the American people were being habitually lied to and their rights violated. I don't care if he was a Russian spy. He did good by the American people. And the idea that he's a spy, I think, is false anyway. He was offered citizenship because he can't return to his home country, and he resided in Russia for an extended period. Well, eventually you qualify for citizenship. It'd be funny if he got drafted, though. Putin says, oh, thank you, comrade, for really putting a hole in the Obama administration, but here's an AK-47 to go along with your new citizenship card. Cindy Drellick, ancient stick insect. Yes, they're all hailing the queen for looking presidential. Staged, by the way, so obvious. Yeah, the Pelosi thing was staged, but normally when you threaten the sitting president, usually you get a knock from the Secret Service. I remember the doctor of common sense. He was kicked off YouTube for once saying something like he would like to pistol whip the motherfucker. And I can't remember if he was talking about Obama or who it was. He got banned off the platform. Meanwhile, you can have the Speaker of the House explicitly threatening to punch Donald Trump in a moment of staged in glory, I suppose. But the statement's made and nothing happens. JSpot51, still no solo press conferences. True. And please, no more super chats because my voice is actually going a little bit. I don't know why. Maybe I've got the coof. Oh, no. Silky Johnson, Styx is the anti-jank. Calm, logical, is not a huge fan of horses. I get the reference. The Jackals of Terra Argentum. Do you think Republicans will be smart enough to engage in lawfare to try to minimize the authority of the EPA and BLM? What the nation needs is a larger energy industry, not less. I don't know if they will. The Jackals of Terra Argentum, a follow-up. AOC's head looks like one of those Maui statues from Easter Island. A little bit, yeah. Andrus Burzens, I am on Rumble, and the only issue with the app is you can't rewind. Can of Peas, hey Styx, I got notified on my phone that you started streaming on Rumble. Thanks for setting that up. Yeah, there's about 2,000 people watching live. So yeah, 6,000 people cross-platform. It's going to be great when the midterms come. One more chat and then we'll go offline, I think. Salty Iron Worker, thank you for the $50, by the way. Living in this blue hellhole of New York, I'm wondering even if Zeldin loses, but he loses within 2%, can we take it as maybe, just maybe New York might be starting to change? Wishful thinking, I know. No, if he comes within single digits of Hochul, it's a victory. And it will be analyzed as such, even by the legacy media, I think. If you have a swing from 12, 13-point advantage to a 7-point advantage, election over election, that shows a trajectory that the Democrats would not be happy with. I'd point out that most of New York is actually solidly red. Basically, it's just New York City and Albany that are deep blue. So yeah, I think that I'll go offline here because I want to preserve my voice. Got a million things to do still. I've got to go to the store at some point. I already showered yesterday, so I've gotten into the habit of only showering every other day because it's better for your hair, which is one reason why my hair is always so happy and floofy. You know, that natural oil that's in your hair is not actually bad for it. It just gets annoying after the second day. That's about all. Peace out.